It's been another night of American attacks on Iran and the usual response by Iran with strikes on American allies in the region. But the context for those attacks has changed. President Trump now says he will impose a 20% levy on all cargo that travels through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump said the US will act as a guardian of the strait in an interview with Fox News.
Well, we're taking over the strait. They have nothing. But we had a deal. What nobody knows, we had a deal. It was a done deal. And then they broke it. They always break it. We've had 10 deals with these people, and so we're just going to hit them very hard. And we're going to keep the strait, and we'll probably run it. We'll become the guardian of the strait. Maybe we'll call it the guardian angel of the strait. And we should be reimbursed for that.
Oh, can you just do that? Can you just take over the Strait of Hormuz? Well, the International Maritime Organization said in response there's no legal basis for the mandatory tolls in the Strait of Hormuz, but don't just take their word for it. How about the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio? He was asked about a month ago about the possibility of Iran charging vessels on the strait last month.
No country is allowed to charge tolls or fees on an international waterway. That's existing international law. That's the way it is in international waterways all over the world, and that's the way we expect it'll be here.
Well, that was Marco Rubio there. We're joined now by Simon Geale, an expert on world commerce. He's an executive vice president at supply chain consultancy Proxima. Good morning.
Morning.
We should first talk about the impact that this blockade and this charge will have on global supply chains, because that will in fact impact all economies around the world. So what do you reckon that this will mean in practice?
Well, first of all, the blockade is affecting every business around the world and all of us around the world, whether that's directly or indirectly. I mean, think of something as simple as the prices at the pumps that you pay, the future of the energy price cap, or indeed the amount you're paying for food or components as this ripples through supply chain. So we're all feeling the effect, and the longer it goes on, the worse that will be as we move from sort of pricing shocks into shortage shocks. But when it comes to President Trump, sometimes it can be hard to keep up with these announcements, and they do hit markets and hit people like you and me now much faster than businesses can react. And I think the 20% for now is very much up in the air. It's very difficult to understand what that actually means. Is it 20% on the cost of the ship? Is it 20% on the cargo? Is it 20% on the freight fees? How would you collect it? So a huge amount of detail, and I'm skeptical as to whether that will come into force as the way that's been presented.
Is it even legal, Simon? I mean, how would you, if you owned a vessel travelling through the strait, and America, President Trump has just said we're going to charge you 20% of the cargo, let's say, hand it over. I mean, could those operators say no, thank you, and take him to court? How would that even work?
Well, I think you probably take the opinion of the IMO over my opinion, insofar as that no. As things stand under maritime law, that's not legal. And the details of how that would work, well, there isn't a precedent for it on this scale, on this way. This is an international waterway, some distance from the US. So, the details are super sketchy. But the problem really for businesses, if we just sort of bring this back to businesses, it creates an enormous amount of uncertainty. And so, we've seen the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz has been operating, somewhere between sort of 30 to 60% in recovery from the height of the conflict. And so, ships are still not passing through. That number's gone down now, and this is causing a huge disruption for businesses.
And we've also seen Iran say, OK, fine, fair enough, Trump, but we'll charge less, which does create another problem all of its own. Can I ask you about the talks about Dubai building a port to bypass the Strait of Hormuz? Would that be a workable solution?
Well, I mean, it could be workable for some of what goes through the Strait of Hormuz. But I think what we have to do here is say, first of all, what goes through the strait? So, Hormuz carries lots of, as we know, lots of oil, lots of fuels, lots of petrochemicals, which is, needs some specialist infrastructure, both in the ports and around the world, in the receiving locations. And so, in one instance, that's the building of a specialist port, which can carry some of the volume through the region, but probably not all of the volume. But I think, what we're seeing is that organizations and indeed nations are realizing that they have very little operational resilience, particularly in choke points like this. and adding that resilience costs money. And so this is probably going to be a long-term project, an expensive project, and ultimately, the costs have to fall somewhere.
Finally, Simon, talking about resilience in supply chains, if this does escalate once again into a full blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, how much resilience do businesses have around the world? How long can they keep going without having to make fundamental changes in a situation like that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because if you do look at the Strait of Hormuz and things like food supply, which is kind of a secondary impact, or semiconductors, that's a tertiary impact, you could be looking at, say, 8 to 12 weeks. But we recently questioned 500 CEOs around the world exactly on this topic, and about half of them said that they would see significant disruption to operations and indeed revenues after about 3 weeks.
Simon, that is worrying. Thank you very much for sharing those findings with us. That's Simon Geale there, expert on world commerce from Proxima.
In a social media post, Donald Trump said the Strait of Hormuz was open and that it would remain open with or without Iran's support. He also said the US would charge all vessels passing through the waterway 20% on all cargo. An Iranian spokesman said Iran would not, under any circumstances, allow the US to take charge of the straits, and threatened a forceful response. There's been bombs overnight as well to back that all up. Amena Bakr is head of Middle East and OPEC research at Kepler, joins us now. Amena, morning to you.
Good morning.
This just looks like a right old mess, and with no obvious sign of it being resolved.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of back to square one. A lot of confidence in normality returning to the strait has diminished, and now we're instead of talking about a toll system managed by Iran, the U.S. wants to charge vessels 20%.
But that's not true, is it? That's not really workable. And if the lesson of the last 5 minutes has been anything, is that the country that controls the Strait of Hormuz is Iran.
It is, but I would be against the idea of a toll system. I mean, pre-war, this is a open waterway. It should remain open to all. It's a natural waterway, unlike the Suez Canal, for example. So I don't think any country has the right to impose tolls. And
indeed, Marco Rubio said it would be illegal to impose tolls, and the US didn't want to impose tolls. He said that a month ago.
Indeed, and that didn't hold on for very long. And I'm not sure what President Trump's tactic is. He just sees that, there are wealthy Gulf states in the region, and there's a cost to security.
How much is this affecting oil markets? Because we've been talking, Amena, for 4 months, and they went high. They got up to about 113, 114, I think. They're around 80, 87, 88. I think you'll correct me if I'm wrong now. Is the lesson from this that actually the world copes? That what will happen here in the end is there'll be workarounds, other sources will predominate, there might be a new port opened in Dubai, and in the end, if they keep faffing around on this for years and years and years, the market will find other ways to get business done?
Now, the fact that countries in the region here are building these alternative routes, alternative pipelines and ports, they know that, their confidence in the strait going back to what it was before the war started is there's a very little chance of that happening, and that's why they're pressing ahead with those plans. And are there workarounds? Yes, there are, but they're costly. They're going to take time, and in the meantime, we're going to be in a state of constant volatility. And you're right, oil prices did jump up. We're at around $85 a barrel, but the difference is in February the world was sitting on I would say a healthy level of stocks. Okay. Those stocks are down now and haven't been replenished.
Because that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because we were told, for example, summer holidays might be vulnerable because there's no jet fuel which comes from refined oil, and that doesn't seem to have happened yet. Is that because we're living on a slight false confidence in those supplies, and eventually the stocks will get to a low enough point that this friction on the Strait of Hormuz will become more telling?
It's absolutely the case. I think the longer we have this crisis going for, the more evident the results are going to be in various countries. Sure, some countries manage to have workarounds, more expensive options, source from other destinations and so on, but those pools of supply are going to dry up soon, and we can't ignore the fact that, you have 20% of the global supplies running through Hormuz.
So inflation could be coming, even if it doesn't come quickly, if they don't get this fixed. And presumably you're not very optimistic. Amena?
I'm not, because at the heart of it, the political rift between the US and Iran still stands, and the MOU didn't really resolve that rift. So absent of that happening, I just see a very, very prolonged conflict that's playing out in Hormuz.
And that would lead to high but not crazy high oil prices, which will lead to probably inflation but not crazy high inflation. Is that the sort of normal that we might have to get used to?
Well, we don't know, although the markets have normalized this elevated level of risk, and I don't think they're reacting appropriately to the level of risk that we're facing. But for now, I would say, yes, prices will remain at this kind of $85, maybe $90, but there is a risk definitely to the upside.
Amena, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Amena Bakr there. She is head of Middle East and OPEC research at Kepler.